Good afternoon. It's Tuesday, 5 o'clock in the UK. I'm in London. My guest this week is Keith Farlinger, who comes to us today from just outside Toronto, or as the Canadians would refer to it, the GTA, the Greater Toronto Area. Keith and I met about 7 years ago to do with BDO in Canada and BDO Global, and he is and has been for several years the Chief Executive Officer of BDO International, which is the fifth largest, with clear blue ocean to numbers 6, 7, and 8, fifth largest accounting network in the world. Keith's a BDO lifer who, if you Google him, you won't find very much about him. Because it's all about BDO. But I look forward to catching up. We haven't been able to speak for a couple of years. There's been this kind of pandemic thing in the way, apart from anything else. So it's an absolute pleasure to talk to you today. Welcome, Keith.
Thanks very much, Tom, and it's great to be here. And just one quick thing, people ask me, so why would you ever be a lifer anywhere? And I always use the expression that every time I started getting bored, and I do like doing different things, I just kind of turned my head and there was another opportunity within the organization. And I said to myself, as long as I keep learning every day, why don't I pursue this opportunity? So lifer almost sounds bad sometimes, but for me, it's been amazing. So
fantastic. So you have quite literally, in that learning every day through new opportunities, risen to the very top of the tree. You're the head of the global network. I imagine it's been a pretty interesting time the last couple of years. Perhaps just for the audience, our small live audience, and then our podcast audience afterwards, give a bit of background as to what you do, what the firm is, and where things are now, and then we can get into any kind of topic you'd like to talk about.
Yeah, so the global CEO has been the most interesting and probably the most challenging of roles. And it's kind of the complexity of the world today, and you've got to try and get a bunch of diverse countries and views together to a global organization view. And what I've tried to do over the last number of years as a global CEO is move from a network of individual firms, so a lot of independence, to helping people see that there's real big opportunities, and in some cases, necessities, to work together as a global organization. So we're in the midst of an evolution, but I would say that we still want to stay in that sweet spot, as you describe it, that blue ocean, and not change who we are. So to move to be a global organization, but still retain the culture and some independence that's been a real strength over the years. So that's what I work on most days. And as I say, it's very interesting and can be challenging in helping people see that vision going forward.
That does take me back to when I worked fair bits with BDO Global and BDO Canada about 6 or 7 years ago. The fact that you're not one corporation with a CEO can, at some level, hierarchically, and with a leadership team or board, decide things. It is a network. Perhaps that experience years ago informed a sort of a phrase I use a lot, which is a leader is someone others choose to follow. You have to influence and align a lot more. So that, and I remember conversations with your predecessor in the role, seemed similar quite a number of years ago. And it's interesting you mentioned an evolution as opposed to a revolution, and the cultural piece of the organization. I remember BDO used to always be a big differentiator, used to always be that you had the ability, more partners as a ratio than some of the other top firms, and able to have that personal touch with the clients. But I imagine the culture purpose, direction has evolved a little bit over the years. So I'm speaking past tense. As we enter 2022, talk a little bit about the culture and the purpose and reason for being of the organization.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting, again, looking at it from a global point of view. And it came first from the question of the global regulators. So, we want to know that your culture is consistent throughout your global organization so you can deliver the same high quality. And I got thinking, well, we're independent firms, so I don't know whether I can tell you that our culture is similar throughout the organization. But the more I traveled to different countries, I discovered that our culture is similar. And we try to capture our culture a little bit in our purpose. And we went through a very neat exercise to determine what our global purpose is. But it's people helping people achieve their dreams. And so what that says to me is BDO, our culture is more about helping others, and that could be each other. It could be our clients. It could be our society or communities. That is way more important than our personal gain. So we're more focused on doing the right thing overall. And I think that captures our culture. Whether we're the largest or the fifth largest or whatever, we want to be the best, and we want to be seen as leaders because of how we help other people, not because we're the largest in size or whatever. So yeah.
Yeah, it can feel a bit ephemeral, but it is to some level, internally focused. That said, in the over a year and a half, I've been doing these weekly podcasts. Absolutely, I don't shy away from picking favorites. And one of my favorite ones was your successor as CEO of BDO Canada, Pat Kramer. And I know Pat pretty well. And he came on really as the first wave or two of this pandemic was settling down towards the end of 2020, and just talk through his focus, which was all about the people within the organization so that they could serve the clients. And it was a really expressive way of saying how your organization, how the BDO culture acted. And it was very much about looking after people and doing the right thing. Very simple things, but putting them first in my experience, tends to lead to pretty good results for the business.
Yeah, and Pat and I have worked a lot together, and we talk a lot as well. And part of it lies in our belief that all people have special skills. And so, and part of our duty, and duty is probably not the right word, but one of the things that we want to do is help our people find what those skills are so that they can reach their potential. And I find today that organizations, and it's a generality, don't spend enough time looking for the value of people and actually valuing people. They're in too much of a rush. They're looking for something specific. Whereas we look for people who fit our purpose. And then we find their skill set and determine where they can help us within the organization. And it's a different way of looking at things, but we've got amazing stories. And I was just talking to our head of risk and how we took a person who was essentially the receptionist in our Belgian office, and we found out that he had technology skills that were off the scale, and we've repositioned him into a leadership role because we discovered skills that he had that we didn't even know when we hired him. So I'm a big believer that if you can find those specialty skills and help people develop them, because sometimes they don't even know what their skill sets are, you will end up with a pretty special organization.
Wow. That's a really impassioned take on what is often called diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating to me that you mentioned the head of risk by, I guess, coincidence, picking up on this one, because I'm really passionate about talking to leaders about diversity from an angle that if they're commercially minded, they can look at, which is that if everybody's the same, then you have a huge risk in your organization of groupthink, of not seeing things from different angles. So as an example, one of the things I'm currently studying up on is ADHD and people on the outer edge of the ADHD spectrum. And I mentioned it to somebody who works in really applied science. And they said, that's our R&D people. It's like, that's their behavioral subset, right? So they tend to be interest motivated, highly creative, quite brilliant, often off the charts brilliant. But ask them to be focused by importance and prioritization and to-do lists and tasks, much like audit schedules representing 40% plus of all of the big firms' revenues. And I'm a recovering chartered accountant, as you've heard me say that line, but I use it all the time. So I do resemble that remark in part of me. But that's fascinating. It's that linkage of really seeking to release the potential in people and develop them. That must create so many virtuous circles for the organization.
It does. And, I think, again, we use, diversity and inclusion and equity, and they're very, very important. But I think it starts with, you have to value all your people.
Yeah.
And again, I don't think we value our people enough. And I read recently, Tom, it might have been in McKinsey or whatever, where they say we've really worked hard in developing processes to create a exceptional client experience. Why aren't we doing the same thing for people? So, for example, one of the things, and you've come across, is that to create a acceptable client experience, we use design thinking, really understanding what our customers want, understanding their vision, where they want to go as an organization, and really, helping them, whatever we do, helping them get to that vision where they want to go. Well, shouldn't design thinking apply to our people just as well? Shouldn't we work with our people to say, okay, what are your aspirations in life? What are your skill set? What are the value that you're trying to create? And how can I, as an employer or a partner with you, work to help you get there? So we need to think again more about our people. And we're into a world where there's a shortage of people. It's one of the bigger issues what our firms are starting to face. So we need to start to pay attention how we pull that potential out of people, because they have so much.
I'm a big one for bridging between purpose and the importance of that to leadership, and to the importance of commercial metrics, because you have stakeholders, and in the case of a network, partners in different firms to represent shareholders in other organizations. And I do see what you're talking about as being a massive bridge. The vast majority of our audience are podcast listeners, so they won't see this. But there's a framed commission of business art from Hugh MacLeod of Gaping Void behind me. And it's got a 3-word hashtag on it, which is my personal purpose statement, which is making potential possible. And that's why I'm here. And as long as I'm out there helping other people do that, then that's me. So you can imagine that what you're talking about is absolute music to my ears. And commercially, of course, there is absolutely a massive shortage of global talent in almost every knowledge worker space that's out there. And so, I'm a huge believer in how Disney have operated for many years, and people like Ritz-Carlton and Fairmont Hotels are really looking after their people first so that they can then look after the customers and clients. And so I'm also interested in that the idea of design thinking is very much linked to systems thinking. And, the idea is the answer is within the organization often, much like the answer for that potential is within the person. So believing in them and drawing it out is very powerful. I wonder if you have any other stories about that as to what you've seen, not necessarily going around the world, or hopefully you can travel again soon, but your stories from around the world.
Yeah, I can give you stories, but I think that the other point that I wanted to get across is, and it comes back to the, my role as the global CEO. I learned early in my management education that I personally couldn't solve all the problems. One of the partners pulled me aside and said, Keith, you're trying to do everything yourself, and that's not possible. So think about using other people to help you do it. Mm-hmm. And so I'm a really big believer in team. And as you mentioned, it's a team of a whole bunch of different skill sets. Mm-hmm. And when you bring them together, you basically can solve any issue that you have, because they will bring their skill sets together to solve the problem. So, I think that's part of it. So when I look for team, I'm again looking for skill sets that they have and how they can fit into the overall puzzle. Oh, I don't have one of those, so I need someone like that. So that's what I do. So some of the stories, and our story, our head of risk is an interesting example. A young guy who was our legal counsel, and he was brilliant beyond his years in terms of legal counsel. And when we got thinking about who we could bring in as global head of risk that would be able to work with other people in the department, his name came to mind. And it was kind of out there a little bit because it incorporated a lot more. And even when we went to him, he said, I don't know enough about risk. I don't know that I could do it. But because people really believed in him, team members became very loyal. He inspired that loyalty in people. He's made an amazing difference. So because of that skill set, we thought was really about being a good legal counsel, his real skill set was developing loyal people who would really work with him in all the different aspects of risk. So another example for you of, discovering skill sets to really make things work.
In listening to you, I came up with a leadership model a few years ago, which has called open leadership. So it's moving away from command and control and hierarchy. And it kind of has 4 attributes to it in 2 pairs, which I find complementary. And the second set of attributes are to be open and humble, right? And just in what you've said so far, that's absolutely modeling that. It's like, well, I may be a lifer, but I've been learning and growing every day, and new opportunities. And so there's that openness, and there's this humility of, well, I don't have all the answers, but maybe somebody in the organization does. I'm also picking up this ability to have the insights, to join the dots, to talk to people all around the world in your organization, and individuals and teams and offices. But the other two attributes which go with it, but on their own, without the open and humble, can be toxic. You could see this culturally, are brave and hungry. So you can be brave and hungry and tread on people. You can be brave and hungry and just want the credit for yourself.
Yeah.
But that's not the style. So I guess in this sort of, I'm always looking for people for what are they thinking about, what's current, then what comes next. And I'm wondering for yourself as a leader, what are you looking at next? What are you hungry to do or to achieve, and what feels brave?
Yeah. So, the thing that, there's two things I would say. So, I am very interested in leadership, and so I'm always looking wherever I'm going to go is how I can develop more leaders. Because again, it comes back to the skill set. I think everybody can be a leader in something.
Yeah.
So leadership is something that really intrigues me, and something that I want to continue to do, and helping people develop confidence in themselves to be leaders. So very interested in that. The other thing, and it's a topic in the world today, and that is ESG, sustainability. And it's about, in a lot of ways, doing the right thing. Very complex, multifaceted piece, but I'm very intrigued by that and what I can do. I have 3 grandchildren, one on the way. So you want to make sure that, the world is a place that it can live. The planet is livable. You want to make sure that they are able to survive with their skill sets and so on in the new world. So having grandchildren actually is really changing my perspective in terms of the way I'm thinking. And again, it's the ESG sustainability space, but it'll be different aspects of that where I would like to take what I've learned and see how I can help make a difference.
Cool. And I guess one thing that occurs to me is, I know we're both cyclists. You're significantly better at it than me. And I'm 56, and I'm estimating you've got about 10 years on me. That it's one of those areas which the idea of being 40 plus is over the course of history is an anomaly. The idea of being 50 or 60 plus and fit and healthy there just isn't much research on it. So as long as you stay on your bike and stay fit and healthy, you're probably going to be around for another 30 or 40 plus active years. So does that look like, of course, you always want to leave space for people behind and move on to the next thing, but does that look like more with BDO in some capacity, or does it look like some other space, given you've got decades ahead of you?
Yeah, so I'm thinking it will be post BDO, basically. I'm at the point, or getting not quite at the point, but at the point where I'm looking not to have a day job. And again, focus on kind of rebalance your life. We talked before we started in terms of the travel and all that kind of stuff. It's difficult in this role, and actually it's been one of the good thing about the pandemic is that I haven't had to travel. So yeah, I'm looking to bring some balance and do more of the things that I really like to do rather than I have to do. Even though I enjoy what I do every day, I think there's some other things that I would like to do.
Sure. Okay. So, and you mentioned the ESG space, And obviously there's the one that often is top of mind is environmental sustainability. What else do you see in that space, that because you must talk to a lot of other leaders of multi-billion-dollar organizations? What other things can you see that can be a focus for senior leaders in the next few years?
Yeah, well, again, going back to the earlier part of our discussion, the whole diversity, equity, inclusion is part of the sustainability piece that I see. It's really, really important. And again, I think there's still a lot of work to do in that area. In the world today, I think a lot of people talk about stuff, and quite well, they post a purpose up on their website, and they talk about diversity, inclusion. They're kind of going through the motions. So I'm much more interested in, okay, like, how do we really make a difference in that area? BDO has made a global pledge on the net zero. So I really want to, take that pledge and make it into something that we are actually executing on. So we're in the process of doing that. So there's all these headlines that we all come up with, but it's really taking the headlines and make them actually come true. And it's a circle, and you need the people to make that happen. And so how do you engage with your people and make them passionate about things, or help them see the passion that you see about it to actually make things happen? So, yeah.
Well, yeah. And as we perhaps circle around and summarize, and the conversation pieces you were talking about around looking to see the unique abilities in people, believing in them. There is nothing more powerful. And you're a grandfather now, and 3 and another one on the way. So sometimes with a little, and I just remember when my kids were small, it's like, there's nothing more powerful than telling a 3 or 4, 5, 6-year-old that you believe in them, that they can do something. And I guess for me, some of the cultural pieces are about the truly deep internal activities within an organization that aren't the things on the wall or on the website, that actually model it. Because if when an organization really is, when it's people helping people achieve their dreams as a purpose, and that starts with the people within the organization, and it starts with helping them see what they might do. Your example of your head of risk not necessarily even believing in their own ability to take on that job until they were believed in, and then that gives them the power and confidence to build things. That is the sort of thing that builds a diverse and inclusive workforce, and it hits the social and governance side of ESG. So I just would encourage listeners to listen back to this, and perhaps listen back to it more than once we've summarized, to listen for the really powerful things that you're talking about, that are your drivers, that are the things you're looking for all the time in your connective role. Because the global CEO isn't in your network, is not the all-powerful person who can dictate. It's the person who connects the different organizations and different potential, right? So that's just me kind of summarizing a little bit. I guess what I'd like to do is to always leave my guests to take a little bit of time to gather everything together and give their last thoughts and have the last word for the listeners.
Yeah, so BDO, and again, I've always tried to do some things a little bit different, because things get too stereotyped. A purpose, people have a purpose. So we don't have a purpose. We call it our why. Mm-hmm. Our vision, we don't have a vision. We have a dream. And our dream is, it's time for BDO to lead. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing how important leadership is. People can really relate to that. Our firms can really relate to that. And when you start to explain, well, that doesn't mean that just the CEOs are leaders or just the firms are leaders. That means all of us. It's time for BDO to lead means all of us. It's time to find our leadership. And so I just, again, I think that really being careful for organizations to think about how you're going to get the attention of your people. And it's not about just putting it on your website or whatever. It's about stating it in a way where they can really relate to it. And as you say, acting it every day. You know, you can't tell everybody what you're like. Everybody will actually tell you what they see. And I think that's the true thing in the end. So I want people to see BDO and say, wow, you guys are leaders. I want people to see BDO and say, yeah, you're all about helping other people. And so it's what they say in the end. That's my measure, not what we say we are. So I think that's the really important thing that I think about as we go forward.
Fantastic. Looking to keep it compact to 30 minutes for people's weekly listen. It's been an absolute pleasure. Wonderful to reconnect to you, and all the best with being able to get out on the road as things open up soon. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Tom. My pleasure being here to talk, and it's great to see you again.
Cheers. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.